the beginning took place very early. If I were able to trace it, it's a bit artificial, but if I have to trace it, very early on in sort of secondary school, I was very much interested in psychology. So my father used to make me read a lot of books, so I read Dostoevsky's novels, and I got very much interested in psychology, and I sort of went on to do my psychiatric social work in Agra, and then I got interested in psychiatry. And once I started sort of getting involved in psychiatry, I realized that that there are more larger issues to mental health than sort of psychology or psychiatry specifically. So as a result, I decided to sort of broaden my interest into other factors and processes having a bearing on health, and then the whole world of public health and social medicine opened up. And then when I went for my research studies to JNU, I entered this school of social sciences, wherein they had a center for social medicine and community health, where a lot of this public health literature, social medicine literature, social sciences and health was basically discussed and taught to us by very good teachers, some of them who were pioneers in the field. And that sort of whetted my appetite to work on the field of health. So the bulwark of my work has basically remained as as an examination of, or a consideration of, or an engagement with the theoretical presuppositions behind the foundations of medicine and social science interface. This is broadly what I have been doing, and this is broadly one of my major areas of work. I have other areas of work, but in health, this is my major area of work.
If you have to summarize based on your experience and work, what beyond medical or clinical factors affects health?
Well, as I said in the morning today, there are two ways of looking at it. One is, of course, to say that something like social structure, or for example economic development, or for example issues of justice and equity have a direct bearing on health. But the point that I'm trying to say is that these issues have basically been raised by different people at different times as a result of the different perspectives which they hold towards the world in general, towards social transformation in general. So instead of basically asking this question, or me trying to answer this question, that what are the factors which have a bearing on health, it's always better to say that, look, if I approach the problem in a certain manner, then this factor appears to have a major bearing on health. Dependent upon the theory that is adopted by the person who's making the analysis, rather coming to a final conclusion that these are the factors. Of course, this is not to say that a factorial analysis is not helpful. Immediately, for the purposes of policy, it is extremely helpful. As you know, we can immediately devise quickly some policies and measures. Many of them have very good rewarding effects also. But what happens is that if you don't consider these basic theoretical approaches, which leads you to consider certain things very deeply, then what happens is that problems become recurrent. So you take a step, you think that you have sort of handled the problem, and then something unexpectedly comes up, and that appears unexpected because you did not explore the fundamentals very clearly. So suddenly something comes up from the fundamentals, and then you don't know what to do. It's a bit like a volcano, You sort of, a volcano erupts, and then you rehabilitate people, you move people away, but you don't study the fundamental processes of the volcano, plate movements, the lava structure, and as a result, you end up in ad hoc sort of responses. So my whole purpose is that this, instead of having a more ad hoc response, something which changes according to circumstances of time, why don't we also do a more deeper study which will enable us to understand processes at the more fundamental level, so that we can actually have a more sustained approach towards good health, and that might lead you to a new nomenclature, but doesn't matter. Basically it's about well-being. People should feel well, that's the idea.
So, if you have to take an example of public health problems in India, uh, can you pick any of the particular issue and explain with what India has responded, taking SDH approach into account, and what it has fallen short of?
Let me take the question of science, because science is so clearly connected with clinics, you see. Obviously, science is something which is very closely connected with a certain process of evolution of European society. You are aware of that, the Renaissance, the Reformation, the Enlightenment, and therefore the scientific revolution, which basically led to the development of modernity as well as with the growth of all the social sciences, the sciences, technology, and so on. So much of the cutting edge work that we get to learn and know in medicine today comes from this particular background. So it was largely, what was this background? It was a sort of a broad consensus brought about by a lot of tumultuous social changes. Then these are the things which we can do, and these are the things which we shall do, and that took the form of the scientific revolution, modern science and technology, the benefits of which we are basically enjoying. So the growth of medicine, if you look at the history of medicine, you will find that the growth of medicine are basically, and its subspecializations, are very basically fundamentally premised on this basic consensus about the method of science itself, and also about the benefits and desirability of science for a future society. Now, when you come to something like the social sciences, how are we going to make sense of it? Now, we are talking about social determinants. So when you want to look at the social, what is the equipment that we have to look at the social outside that of clinics when we are talking about health? So naturally then you try to shop around, and then you'll say, there is something like the social sciences, okay? Now, the history of the social sciences, if you look at it very carefully, you will find that they are also very closely associated with the growth of science. The social sciences emerged as a distinction from philosophy and religion. So therefore, the scientific method was incorporated into these new humanities called the social sciences, and therefore they were supposed to be second cousins to the core scientific disciplines. So in that sense, looking at the social from the angle of the social sciences sort of brings about a consonance in the so-called scientific method between clinics and the social. So there is a congruence there is a convergence there. So fundamentally speaking, you don't really break a major parameter when you basically look at the social determinants of health, between social determinants of health and clinical medicine, because you're basically proceeding from the scientific perspective. You see? So there is nothing fundamentally new or different that you are seeing when you are looking at the social. So my exhortation is that if you are conscious of this, then I'm not prescribing anything. I'm just saying that if you're conscious of this, then you should ask yourself the question that the data that you are getting by looking at social determinants of health, does it sort of do anything fundamentally different to clinics, or does it sort of reinforce clinics? Because if it reinforces clinics, well, then clinics is more or less on the okay path. I mean, they're doing a fine job. But you are asking this question about social determinants of health because you have a nagging feeling that something more is required than clinics. If that were the case, then you need to look at the social at a way which is not scientific, as far as we know it.
Last thing, sir. For young researcher practitioners or students of public health, any particular message you want to give when they start learning or thinking around social determinants of health?
Yeah, I think a very good way would be, a very practical way would be, is that they should, the message that should be given to them, meaning not in a dictatorial way, just as a sort of an encouragement as teachers, is to basically let them explore different disciplines, to get an idea of the messages behind, central messages of different disciplines. How does literature look at society? How does politics look at society? How does history look at society? So that they get a feeling that there are different ways of looking at a person, and its interaction with society and the concept of well-being in many different ways. And as public health students is just one perspective of looking at the well-being of a human being, and then leave it to them to sort it out in terms of their coursework, in terms of their, give them a lot of optionals in the curriculum, leave it to them to sort it out and to work closely with mentors, tutors, guides, supervisors when they do their research, either the MPH thesis or the PhD thesis, to basically sort this out within themselves as to how they want to basically, understand this problem regarding science and non-science, which I had mentioned earlier. That would be the best thing.
Thank you, sir.